Go ahead and be present with your breath. Allow your awareness to soften a little bit so that it is less attentive to the conditions, to the constantly changing dynamics of the world. And let that awareness follow the breath into the body. So we may be present with presence. Allow the awareness to perhaps drop down a little bit out of the mind that is also constantly moving and churning and making things up and assessing the dynamics of everything relative to the ego body. And let the awareness drop down out of that movie, out of that constant play, into a grace of being, into a ground of being that is always present. Beautiful. Welcome. My heart just got very glad. Or perhaps it's always been that way and I just pointed my awareness to it. But it's good to see beautiful friends and those who are interested in being more present to something other than the mind's constant assessment and descriptions of the dynamics of our lives, of the world. Let me do a little stuff here. Okay. So glad you're here. Beautiful. It's a beautiful day here in Sedona. It's blue skies and red rocks and little chattering quail out there. It's sweet. So a couple of little housekeeping things. This morning's Satsang is also being live broadcast on YouTube, on my new channel on YouTube. And so if you're watching it there, either live or you're watching after the fact, please go ahead and give a thumbs up if you find there's any value here. And that way the content becomes more available to others. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and do so. So you can be alerted to or given notice that when satsangs are going to happen, as well as when regular content is posted. Yeah, I think that's it for housekeeping. So, satsang. The opportunity we have here today is really to bring our awareness back to a place of stillness, to reconnect with our ground of being, with the essential nature of our being that is always there, always at rest, and is kind of underneath or behind the mind's assessments and descriptions and judgments and stories about the world happening around us. And I don't know about for you, but this week has been a lot of churn. There's a lot of information. There's a lot of change. There's a lot of things that are unknown and changing and uncertainty and new landscapes being presented and new opportunities and a whole divergence of opinions and assessments and rights and wrongs and truths and false and all these dynamics. So the world around us is very active. It's very active right now with a lot of unknown and a lot of change. And when that happens, our ego body, the constructed self, the sense of self that we have created, that sense of self, that ego body gets very active. It says, all right, whoa, whoa, a lot to deal with here. And it basically says, all right, this is my territory. This is my terrain. All right, let me at it. Let me at it. I'll tell you what's right. I'll tell you what's wrong. I'll tell you what's good. I'll tell you what's bad. I'll tell you what's a threat. I'll tell you what's not a threat. I'll tell you who's a jerk. I'll tell you who's good. I mean, it just totally leaps into action and says, I got this, because there's a sense of threat. The ego body is a self that feels separate, has forgotten its divinity, has forgotten its connection to the ground of being, to our essential, eternal, imperishable nature. It feels separate from that because it's a constructed self. And because of that, it feels very threatened, and it really wants to kick into gear to protect its own image, to protect the self that it has created. So that was active for me this week. Really noticing where I felt threatened by a world that was perhaps moving in a direction that that contradicted or was in opposition to my egoic sense of what was right and what was wrong. But the beautiful thing was that with a practice, there can be a knowing of that. There can be a little bit of a separation. There can be a resting in a imperishable and unmoving peace that is the nature of consciousness itself. There can be a resting in that, watching and noticing and being aware of the fact that the ego was trying to pervade everything with its opinions and its assessments. And to recognize that that was going on, and to have a place to go, to have a place to rest in and go, wow, this is fascinating. How my mind can create such agitation and separation and division and judgment and villains and heroes. And underneath all of that, pure consciousness is just going, this is fascinating. I'm good. I'm aware of all of this. So we can return to a resting place of being. There's a beautiful, beautiful quote, teaching that I was reminded of recently. And it says basically that the bird resting on the twig is not at peace because it trusts the twig won't break. It is at peace because it trusts that even if the twig were to break, that it would be fine, that its essential nature is to fly. Its essential nature is to it knows its capabilities. When we're identified as the ego construct, there's some inherent knowing in that knows that we are relying upon something as self that is unreliable, that is unstable. And hence, as like the bird would be saying, I got to make sure this twig doesn't break, because this sense of me that I'm relying on, I know isn't stable. I know it's filled with judgments. I know that it feels separate. I know that it is a temporary construct and therefore not really my essential nature, my essential ground of being. And therefore, since I don't trust this thing I call me inherently, whether that's known or it's more subconscious, I don't trust my sense of self, this self that I call me, because it's constantly all over the place. So if I don't trust that, then what can I do? I can manipulate the world. I can control the world. I can try to control what is uncontrollable. I can try to make sure this branch, this twig never breaks, because I don't trust that if it does, that I might not find myself greatly, greatly, greatly in fear. So I'm going to open up the mics in just a little bit for anyone who wants to dialogue and explore this dynamic that we all go through, where we perhaps slip back and forth between being identified with the ego self and less identified with or less connected with the essential nature of our being, of our grace, and what the life experience is when we move, when we become slightly more interested in the essential nature of awareness that is unmoving, within which all thoughts come and go, all sensations come and go, all emotions come and go. They come and they go. You remain. I remain. The pure I remains. And it's good to recognize that what's typically happening in the more sleep-like state is the noise in the mind is typically, what do I think about that? What do I think about that? Is that a value to me? Is that a threat to me? Does that please me? Does that displease me? And it's very helpful to become quite aware of who is that me? Who is that I? It's not the ground of peace. It's not the ground of loving awareness. It just really wouldn't be asking a lot of those questions. There's so much to say. There's so many ways to look at this. So maybe the best way to look at this is to see where you are in this. To, if anyone wants to share or ponder something and explore it together, then that'll direct, rather than me just saying, "Here's what I think is important to know." What are the questions? What's your experience, and how do you want to explore a bit? So. Beautiful. Hi, Charlotte.
Hi, Jess. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. Oh, it was so good spending that time with you.
It really was. I feel, even with all of the chaos that's around us, I'm finding it easier to get into that place of peace and love within myself, and it's been really great after the sessions with you. So, thank you again. And
I so appreciate you. Beautiful.
I appreciate you.
Yeah.
My question today, if you can imagine, I still have questions after the last week.
So do I.
How do you use the sense of inner peace in decision making? It's still part of the outside world, but I still have to make decisions about my medical care, and a lot's coming up in the next couple of weeks. It's going to get even more chaotic for me.
Yeah.
And just wondered, do you just meditate on it? How do you tap into that inner self to make difficult decisions?
Okay. Yeah. Beautiful. So let's remember what the mind is good at. It's good at strategizing. It's good at putting a plan together. The motivation to put that plan together is a little bit different. Do I feel completely unsafe? Do I feel separate? Do I feel threatened? If that is motivating the plan, then the mind is involved in both the assessment of the situation and the motivation and the plan. So strategy, logistics, the mind's very good at that. So let's let the mind look at, okay, how do I implement what wants to be done? The question of what wants to be done, let's give that to the heart. Let's give that to the nature of our being. So part of it is, of course, and you are practicing your through your meditation and self-inquiry, you're practicing your knowing of you. Yeah. That essential ground of being, that essential nature of consciousness that we are. That, remember, it's the pure loving awareness of the one consciousness, if you will, dancing with, moving through our unique soul signature. So there's some things that will be more resonant with you than they would with me, right? So we start to learn how to listen to the guidance that is a softer and gentler guidance. So we start to learn to listen to, well, not what would my panicked mind do, but behind that, underneath that, is there an inherent peace? And for you, I know you're able to tap into that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we come into what is a state of contemplation. Contemplation is to, it's a beautiful thing. I haven't thought about this for a while. Contemplation is when we come to rest in a grace, in a peace, in an ocean, if you will, of stillness and quiet, to then allow the decisions, the situations, the conditions to present themselves, and not give them so quickly to the ego, not give them so quickly to the constructed identity of I'm worthy, I'm unworthy, I'm separate, nobody likes me. I mean, all these different stories that the mind makes up about ourselves.
Yeah.
To not give it so quickly to that, but to give it to the heart, to allow us to remain in a state of rest and allow the questions to arise and be with them. And it's a practice to be with what we are considering without so quickly assessing the situation and the conditions. Does this make sense so far?
Yes, because I mean, if you recall, all of my noise is out here, and the peace is in here
Mm-hmm.
within my heart, and
Yeah.
so it's taking that differentiation between the noise and the quick judgment, and well, so and so will think I'm crazy if I do this, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't have enough money to do this, and it just all of that stuff is out here.
Mm-hmm.
But if I sit with it in here, refocus it,
Yeah.
it's going to be clear from my sense of love.
Yeah. So when you start to feel the difference between moving from love that has a certain quality to it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
A certain grace. I love that word, grace.
Right.
When you start to move from that grace into an agitation,
Mm-hmm.
into a vilification, making people wrong, into a sense of separation, into the judgment. This is the beautiful thing. Our judgments they're going to be there. We've got this habitual way of assessing the world and conditions, and so we get to meet them. And in this practice that you're in, you get to feel that difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as soon as we do, we can say, "Oh, then I know that my separate and small sense of threatened self has taken over again." And is said to the heart, yeah, you're cute and all, but. And we got to remember the mind is not a paragon of truth by any stretch of the imagination. Our habit is to go to it, to feel, to think about what is the truth about what is happening, right? The mind doesn't know the truth of anything. The mind only knows its thoughts about what's happening. Right? That beautiful teaching that says, what is happening is what is, just to be with what is, to contemplate it, to meet what is before we jump into the thoughts about it. What is what is happening just before we have a thought about it.
Mhm.
And as soon as we give it right to the mind, tell me what's happening, the mind will say, okay, yeah, great, I'll tell you what's happening. And it's not telling us what's happening. It's telling us its conditioned thoughts, its conditioned fears or attachments or addictions. That's what it's giving us. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So contemplation, to allow ourselves, to train ourselves to be at rest and not go so quickly to trying to figure it out, but to allow the heart and I call it the heart, but that's just the portal of rest within, through which our soul can speak to us. The soul can answer, well, this feels resonant to me and that doesn't. So the soul would say, can we move toward that? Because that feels right.
And I need to let more of it come into that space than out here.
Yeah.
I spend way too much time in this region when it comes to
Sure.
religions, and so
Yeah.
bringing it back. Yeah,
Especially when things feel pressing, right?
right, right.
Look, I don't have the time to contemplate. I don't have the time to feel into this. I got to figure this shit out right now because there's a lot of threat here. But the more we get used to this and trained in this within ourselves, the quicker the faith, the trust is of I know the direction to go. Now, once we feel into that, we can then employ the beautiful capabilities of a strategic computer to say, all right, now that I'm feeling into this, can we
Mhm.
reference how that's going to impact my finances? Can we reference how that's going to impact that relationship?
Yes, and that's helpful too, to do it first, to contemplate with it, and not do the, well, I've got so much shit to do, so I'll do that later.
Yeah, exactly. So don't dismiss the mind, because if we do that, it's going to freak.
Yeah.
Nor is it all that wise. I mean, it's good to really feel into something and then look at the logic of it and say, well, does that is like, for instance, if you're feeling about, yeah, I think I might move somewhere. I think it might be time to move. Great, you know that's feeling right. It's the direction you're moving. Then you can give it to your mind and say, should I call my landlord tomorrow and give notice? And then you go, well, no, okay, let me think about this. Actually, in a couple of months' time, it's probably better. And but you already know where you're moving toward.
Yeah, yeah.
And now you're just figuring out how to do it. Beautiful, Charlotte. Anything else on in that?
I'm definitely going to sit with that a lot today, and
Yeah.
just try and transfer out of the noise and into the heart more.
Yeah.
Because some things are, I do have to move, but it's a question of
Yeah.
where do I go for care and things like
Right.
that. So I know all of this is coming. I just trying to point myself not in the right direction for all of the
Yeah.
superfluous stuff, but where's my soul to go?
So the condensed version of everything we just talked about was, rather than try to figure out life so that you can come back to peace,
Yeah.
go to your peace first.
Yes.
And from peace, explore what is resonant with peace.
Right. Yes.
Beautiful. All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Charlotte. Thank you, my dear. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hmm. That bird sitting on that twig if we're resting on the foundations of the life that we've created around us, the relationships, the work, the home, if we're resting on all of that, but we don't know the beingness, we don't know truly who we are, we're only identified with the separate ego identity, that's not going to feel at peace. Because what happens is when we give so much authority to this computer to tell us the truth of things, if we go to that to say, I need to be my inner peace, I need to go to my peace, and we go to more peaceful thoughts, that's valuable. It's certainly better than not having peaceful thoughts. But we aren't, the mind, peace doesn't arrive in the mind. Peace is not a state of mind. The mind will mimic that, and it can have peaceful thoughts for a while, but we all know that those are then need to be maintained and held, and they're slippery, and they're not stable, right? Because if they were stable, then why would we slip out of it? So if we're identified with trying to be a more peaceful person, a more understanding person, a more compassionate person, a more gracious person, so if we're trying to manipulate and reshape the ego identity to be a peaceful identity, to be a gracious self, to be a compassionate self, that's beautiful. That's good work. And God, we could certainly all use a lot more of that in the world. But it's to recognize that that is a stepping stone. But truly, the real liberation is in recognizing the imperishable grace of peace and beingness underneath all of it. And to go back to our analogy of the screen and the movie, if the movie's trying to play a more gracious movie, a more compassionate movie, a projection, the mind's projection of self, the mind's dream of self, trying to create a more pleasing, peaceful, undisturbed dream, that won't ever stabilize. It's always moving. And to keep trying to project that and always keep that movie behaving is difficult. It is not sustainable. But to remember that all of that is playing out upon a pure consciousness that's already at peace, that is undisturbed. And we are the awareness, preconditioning before any ego self was developed. There is an essential ground of being, an essential nature of being that is the one peace and love and compassion. Again, the words will always pale to describe this, the beingness of consciousness, moving through a unique soul signature, a unique energy pattern, a unique modulation of that pure love. And we all have our unique modulation, and it's not the ego self, it is the soul self. Okay. Other questions, other ponderings, navigating this journey of awakening and maintaining a more wakeful beingness and not being so easily lured into and sucked into the egoic identity of self. I can tell you that there is such peace. Okay, all right. So here's the practice, a practice. It's valuable to break the habits of the dream. It's valuable to break the habits of the pervasive mind activity. So one of the most powerful practices, inquiries that you can participate in is to, especially when you're coming out of a place of meditation, when you've arrived a little bit or a lot in a state of presence, when you've followed your breath into the body and recognize that there is something that is always present, perhaps a peace that is always there. Even if you just get a glimmer of it, a sense of, oh, like, where's my peace? Where's my peace? Oh, there it is, just before my thoughts. So we've talked before about different techniques or different inquiries of feeling into what if I didn't have this whole egoic identity? What would that feel like? What would be there? What would be underneath it? What would be the ground of being upon which this ego identity has been built? So you rest in some state of peace. Then, upon opening your eyes, you give yourself a little instruction before opening your eyes. So go ahead and close your eyes right now. Come to any semblance of rest, any semblance of peace. You can imagine dropping down about 3 feet below the surface of the ocean into a beautiful Caribbean blue, into a calm expanse of stability and stillness, knowing that just 3 feet or 4 feet above you, the waves are doing whatever the waves are doing. But underneath, there is a beautiful rested presence. Breathe in and feel that in the body. Even just a little glimmer of a sense of a rested peace, a stillness, knowing I am that. I am not the mind's thoughts. I am not the mind's agitations. I am the pure grace of awareness, within which thoughts come and go, and old habits of identity and fear and conditioning arise and pass. But I am the peace, imperishable. So come to rest in any semblance of that is accessible to you now. And before you open your eyes, the instruction is, when I open my eyes, I'm going to be present with the world and not name anything. I'm not going to name anything. I'm not going to identify anything. I'm not going to tell a story about anything. Basically, I'm going to remain in my heart. I remain in the presence of peace. And even with my eyes open, I'm not going to give the world directly to my mind to tell me what's happening. I'm going to give the world to my heart to feel into the world. So just slowly open your eyes and allow yourself to gaze upon the world around you. And don't name it anything. Don't name it as an object. Oh, that's a tree or that's a plant. Don't name it a color. Now, even as I say that, your mind might have just gone, oh, yeah, that's blue or that's red. That's okay. That's not a failure of this exercise. It's to notice it and then take a breath and stop. Let the object just be. Let the world just be. Don't name it as a thing. Notice if the mind is saying, yeah, but then I don't know what's happening. The mind is so addicted to its assessments. It thinks its assessments are what is happening, are the reality of things, and it's not. Its assessments of the world are just its assessments. Typically, you are not experiencing life. You're experiencing your mind. Can life exist without all of your opinions and thoughts about it? That's the practice. It takes a while. That's why they call it a practice. The first time I ever tried that, it lasted for about 3 seconds. Now it's more of a ubiquitous just way of being. It's pretty pervasive throughout my entire day. Things happen. I watch my mind try to tell me what's happening. And there's some assessments, certainly. But it's just that we don't lose the resonance of peace and of presence underneath all of it. We're going to engage in the world. We're certainly going to engage in the world. It's just that let's not collapse into the thoughts and the judgments and the opinions. Let's let them come and let them go and explore them. And then, but just feel into what is our soul's nature? How does our soul's nature want to engage? How does our peaceful continence want to engage with the world around us? And we can say yes to things, and we can say no to things, and we can set boundaries. But without the feeling of until I get this world to behave, and until I get everyone to behave, until I get everything shaped just right so it matches my ragged condition of self, until I get the world to puzzle piece fit with my egoic identity, I won't be at peace. So let's just stop naming. Let's stop. So we're breaking the habit of giving everything to the mind to tell us what's happening. Somebody insults us. I was in the store the other day and I'm standing on the place I'm supposed to stand, keeping my social distance. And the guy behind me is halfway across, he's 2 feet from me, not 6 feet. And I turned and I just asked him, hey, can you do me a favor? Would you mind stepping back to the line? I'd be more comfortable. And he tried to shame me, did the whole, oh, you think he actually said, yeah, people like you are just, you get off on controlling everybody, with your personal space. And it was so beautiful to be able to watch that happen and not give that to my mind, not give that to my ego. Because the ego would have been like, well, let me tell you. But when it just came in and it just met the ground of being that is pervasive, that is awakened, it was just compassion. It was just, I just said, do you want to go first? And he was like, no. And then he ended up stepping back. But so let's stop giving everything to our ego. But to do that, we need to awaken our beingness through meditation, through inquiry. Who am I really? What's the nature of my being? It's not my thoughts. It's not my conditioning. It's not my programming. Yeah. So any questions around that activity? Anything that anyone wants to share or explore around how quickly we collapse in and give everything to the egoic identity to tell us what's happening? See a chat here. So the question, what about right and wrong, truth and falsehood? We're in a time where facts are disputed. Does one have to set these aside to maintain connection with deeper self? That's a good question. Is the most that can be done is to, quote, toggle between assessing circumstances and inner peace? Good question. Yes. Not only is it the best we can do, we find that it's really a beautiful, valuable experience to not forget, to keep forefront, to keep present the essence, the true essence of our being. Presence, loving awareness. This is the peace, that, and we can put it into, we can give it to Gandhi, give it to Buddha, give it to Ram Dass, give it to the Dalai Lama, give it to any of our teachers, give it to any of those who in our lives we recognize have awakened absolute peace. And notice how much more graceful their lives are and the lives of them around them. Yeah, I've been looking at, the conspiracy theories and how they resonate with me and how they don't. But what's beautiful is I've been able to, and I'm just speaking from my own experience, that's the most direct place I can speak from. But the experience is to be not taken out of the peace, to be rested in our ground of consciousness, of pure, loving consciousness, and feel into, does this feel resonant? Does it not? And if it doesn't, to be able to say no. On Facebook, to be able to say, no, I don't want this person's feed in my world. I'm not interested. It doesn't resonate. It doesn't feel alive. And the difference between that and I'm going to tell them how dangerous they are, and I'm going to tell them how wrong they are. I can, if I want to engage, I can say, it doesn't feel like that to me. To me, this is how it feels to me. And if they attack me for that, who's the me that is feeling attacked? The ego body. The imperishable grace of being. This is the awakening. The awakening is awakening into our absolute ground of being. That is at peace and can choose. No, that doesn't feel resonant. So I'm going to have less of that in my life and more of that in my life. And if action needs to be taken, if something feels really dangerous, then take the action that needs to be taken. But we needn't take it with drama. We needn't take it with hate. We needn't take that action from derision and separation. Here's another way to feel into it. Within our own being, we have these different dynamics that are playing out. If we vilify, if we make so wrong our own shadow, if we hate the parts of ourselves that are wounded or fearful, then we can't heal them, can we? Then we're creating a war within ourselves. So let's not create that war in the world either. If something needs to be addressed within me, I can address that. I can meet that. I can work with it. I can reshape it. I can find the way to educate, to inform, to let go, to soften this part of me that is crying out. But if I do so from a state of making it so wrong and vilifying it and saying that's needs to go away, because it's separate from me, then I'm not doing the work. Then I won't actually be able to heal. So I hope that maybe addresses that a little bit. I know it's been my practice. It's been so valuable to watch my judgments. Oh my God. I've shared this story before, but Ram Dass, when he went to go see his teacher for the second time in India, his teacher pulled him aside and said, Ram Dass, love everybody. And Ram Dass felt into it for just a second and went, I can't. My mind is so full of judgments. My mind is so full of a sense of separation. So he got to make that his sadhana, his practice, to meet his judgments and not make them wrong, but just to meet them and see if they felt resonant. And if they didn't, and really judgments typically don't, then to meet them and invite them to relax, to let go, to release. So let's take the actions that we feel are resonant that need to be taken without collapsing into anger, without collapsing into vilification, without collapsing into separation. Let's stay in the absolute power. This is the true power of loving, peaceful awareness and presence, and do what needs to be done. But not diminishing our own experience with hate. Beautiful. Okay, another question. What time is it? Okay. From in the practice of not letting the mind name or assess, would you then just be left, would you then just be in the feeling or stillness with no thoughts? That's a great question. Not necessarily. Yes and no. With more and more, yes, with really no thoughts. I was sitting out the other evening in a meditation and under the stars, and I was just being with I was noticing the trees that I wasn't calling trees at the time, but I was just noticing. Let's put it this way. Yeah, there were thoughts. I was still calling them trees. Oh, look, there's trees. But there was a softness to it. There was an ease to it. I wasn't, we get to learn how to practice to be with and notice the movement of things, the things that we attend to. It's valuable to say, that's my car. Otherwise, I'm getting in other people's cars. It's valuable to name things. Yeah, we live in the world of form, absolutely. But to allow to not give it so quickly to the mind, so I was sitting out there, and it was really just this beautiful experience of allowing, if I was naming everything as, this is beautiful, those trees are lovely, this is fantastic. Why? Because I like these things, because I'm creating the experience with my thoughts. What if I just let it be? And there was this whole different experience of the trees were able, in the moonlight, were able just to be their essence. I didn't need to tell them I didn't need to tell myself that's beautiful. The essential nature of the beingness of everything is already so precious. We collapse into our thoughts, we collapse into our judgments. So no, it's not that there's necessarily no thoughts, although that can be the experience as well. It's more allowing any thoughts to be very soft and very gentle and not taken so darn seriously. And to practice and play with, what if I wasn't having a thought about this? How would the experience shift? Yeah, Beautiful. Good question. Yeah. When I sat for a long time in the meditation and just was in the absolute stillness, oh my gosh, I couldn't maintain that. The mind immediately jumped in and said, "What's happening? What's going on? What's there can't be any value in anything that I am not narrating." The mind was saying there can't be any value in anything that I am not describing. That's the practice. To be able to sit with and allow something to unfold, to reveal a conversation and a situation, to allow it to unfold without so immediately going to the story that the ego makes up around it. That's the practice. Okay. Any other questions that want to be voiced? I hope this is valuable. I hope that there's more of a ease and of an awakening into the one that's already at peace. It's valuable to sit and to start with the me that I've been so identified with. It's typically almost 100% in control almost all the time, is a construct of my mind. It's not the actual, it's not the essence, it's not the essential nature of me. It's probably not my soul. It's probably totally my ego construct. So to start with that and to say, and if that wasn't so predominant, what would be there? And if you give that question to the mind says, well, I don't know. Let me think about that. But if we give that question to the heart, we feel into that there might be something that was prior to our conditioning. There might be something else available to us. It can be a beautiful guidance system. And if we access that and allow that and open to that and gain a faith and trust in our ground of being that is very capable of navigating life and moving toward things that feel resonant and away from things that don't, and expressing its desires, if you will, its sense of goals without all the drama. When we are able to really rest in that, it's so much, the ego body can go, oh, thank you for, like, I don't have to be the purveyor of truth anymore. I can just be the logistician. I can be the strategy maker. I don't have to be the decider of truth, of who I am, of who this beautiful essence of our being is. I don't have to keep making this up and remaking it up and reassessing and rejudging my own identity. Thank God. Thank you. Whew. All right. Mary, beautiful. Hi, Mary. Can you discuss the overlap between soul, mind, heart, and beingness? Yeah, that is which are unique to each individual and which are collective universal, the terminology as you use them. That's such a great question. And it's been really valuable to explore into that. And Ajya Shanti has been a beautiful teacher in helping me understand this. Um, words will always fall short, but what you're pointing to is beautiful. That the mind can't grok formlessness very well. And the mind can't grok that. The formless nature of being ends up arriving as a sensation, as a heart knowing, not a mind knowing. But to help the mind understand this is valuable, to give it some objectification to work with. So kind of the easiest way that I found to feel into this was and is the person is temporary. This vehicle of ego, mind, body is a vehicle to help bring the formless into form, so that the one formless, we'll get to this in a bit, beingness, consciousness, can know itself in its infinite potentiality in the world of form. So the person is temporary. It's a vehicle of convenience. The soul is eternal. The soul is kind of the voice that is given to God, that is given to the one being, the one consciousness, the one awareness. There's no separation in the one. For it to know itself in infinite potentiality, it moves through each beautifully tuned soul. So it can know itself as that soul's tuning, and that soul's tuning, and that soul's tuning. So the person is temporary. The soul is eternal. And the love, the one ground of being, is infinite, modulated into soul expressions. So it's this beautiful marriage of knowing all three. And there's more, but this is simplified. To feel into the imperishable grace of love that is wanting to express through this unique soul tuning. And mine happens to like gardening, and another one happens to like cooking, and another one happens to like teaching children, and another one likes to play the saxophone. So that one love, the one consciousness, can know itself through the music of saxophone. And to allow that dance of God and soul to come into an incredible harmony, a beautiful union, carried by this mind-body egoic experience. But most of us have just totally forgotten and are blind to. We're asleep in the dream of the ego body, and we forget the awake consciousness of God and soul, of love and soul, that want to be in this beautiful dance. But when we're so identified with the ego body, we're collapsed into the dream of the temporary self. Dreams are temporary. We wake up from them. And when we do, they tend to fade. We get to play in this dream. We get to play with this ego body. Let's stop taking it so seriously and thinking it is us. That's the trick. That's the liberation. And then we can play with this the whole experience, so that when the guy in the shopping line insults, quote, me, there's no me here to be insulted. It just lands on loving awareness that is in a dream of chess, that gets to ask for what he wants. And hey, can you step back? But I don't have to, the ego construct is it moves into the back seat. It takes a back seat, and then the soul and love dance can just be predominant. And the ego body is just a vehicle to help move it all along. So that's kind of a simplified answer, but it can be helpful. To person is temporary, soul is eternal, a modulation and a vibrational modulation of the one consciousness that can't know itself unless it modulates into these limited modulations. Okay, beautiful. Oh, I love these questions. This is good. It's 10 o'clock in the world of time and space. Thank you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. These these satsangs, this is the Sunday satsangs, are free. They're a gift, and there's in the chat box, and I'll put them in there again. There's an opportunity if you would like to make any donations that help support the all that goes into bringing this love to a larger expression. It's not necessary. There's no guilt around if it's not possible or just it doesn't feel resonant. But if it is possible, then it's welcome. If you're on YouTube, please, again, thumbs up, give a thumbs up to this satsang and subscribe to the channel. And thank you all for bringing your consciousness alive and yourself to this beautiful dance. We have this precious opportunity to live this life of consciousness. And I love the fact that more and more people are really asking, what's going on? What's happening? Who am I? What is this ground of being that is so luscious? And how do I just allow that and surrender to that and trust that that can live this life quite beautifully without needing my whole story of self to jump in and take control? What a time. What a time. We're all getting to meet the things that don't work and come to rest in the imperishable grace that is always there. Let's all be the bird that doesn't worry if the twig breaks, because the world is breaking around us. There's not all, but a vast majority of the systems and constructs that we have placed our sense of safety on are falling apart. What a beautiful opportunity it is right now for all of us to recognize that putting all of our sense of self and safety upon the ego body and all the constructs around us to maintain is really not a great strategy. Let's come into our grace of being so that even as the twig breaks, the bird just goes, whatever, I'm good. I'm always good. All right. Much love, everybody. Blessings. And I'm going to leave the chat open here. So if anyone wants to use those donation links, you can. Much love. I'll see you next Sunday. And if you want to work with me directly and explore deeper into your meditative practice, into the awakening of this grace that you are, so that it's more predominant, and let me know. This is my love. All right. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.